Private Darrell was serving in the military, and he was one of the members who stormed the beach at Normandy. He was all about serving his country. Many of you, I am so grateful for doing the same thing, that are. Private Darrell was entranced by what was going on. He heard bullets. He saw the evidence of bombs going off. And right next to him, in an area where the water was lapping up on the shoreline, he too was succumbed to what was going on. He was struck by a bullet, but he tells in a pamphlet that he wrote, his buddy next to him was killed. He writes these words, "I thought the world was coming to an end." Patsy came into her place of worship on September the 11th, 2001 in north central Texas, and she flung herself prostrate to the altar. She had just seen the news of the Twin Towers being devastated. She was reporting to her church family and her pastor that the world was coming to an end. Have you ever gotten kind of a sucker punch, some news that just was horrible type of news? You knew that the world was coming to an end because of that news. Maybe it's a family member that is going through a life-changing moment with disease. Maybe it was news of somebody saying to you, I'm not in love with you anymore. Maybe it was some kind of devastating news that you couldn't just fathom what you were going to do. And maybe you said, the world is coming to an end. The people of Thessalonica were saying just that. They were saying, oh my goodness, the world is coming to an end. So Paul wrote these words that we heard just moments ago, and that we can continue to let them ourselves hear as we reread 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. If you've ever felt like the world is coming to, if you've ever felt like you're in the middle of a great catastrophe, can you imagine what some of the folk in the Philippines are feeling today? I can't imagine it. It would have to be unfathomable. It would have to be one of those moments that I would raise my hands in the air and say, the world is coming to an end. The good news is the world is not coming to an end. 2 Thessalonians has 3 very important pieces for us today to take home, to take in consolation for those moments that we feel as if our world is completely turned upside down and we're not sure what's going to happen next. First of all, it is a concept that needs to be addressed. When all around all of us, people at your work, people in your family, people with whom you associate at leisure and recreation, when they say to you, don't you believe that these are signs of the end times? Because believe me, if you haven't heard it already, you're going to. You're going to hear people on your MySpace, your Facebook page, all of your social media, and those of us who don't use social media, we're going to hear it. We're going to hear prognosticators tell us, these are signs of the end times. The Apostle Paul says, don't listen. The Apostle Paul says, wait a second. There are some things that are going to happen. That is true. And he names them. He names things that will be happening. But he also says, let yourself be guided by something in verses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You may have heard it. Let me remind you. As to the coming of the Lord, let me tell you what's going to happen. That's what he says in verse 1. Let me tell you. So pay attention. Do not let yourselves be deceived in any way, shape, or form. That's what he says in verse 3. There will be something significant that happens. He names it the lawless one. You want to use the word Satan? Go right ahead. If you want to use the word evil one, go right ahead. Paul names it the lawless one will present himself, will take up residence at the throne of God, will take up residence and saying, I am God. Paul says, until that happens, you should not be concerned about the end. Rather, Paul invites the people of Thessalonica and maybe now even the people of Hayes and residing areas to consider what we might do. For in verse 13 and 14, he spells out very clearly what we ought to be about. He says, in all things, with thanksgiving. Let yourself then be guided by the Apostle Paul with thanksgiving. Now, one way that one of our friends here at the church, she had a grandmother, she stated it this way. Grandma always used to tell me that if the world is coming to an end, I ought to be thankful. I ought to be thankful that I'll be counted among those going on. That's what one of our members said. Paul says, he doesn't say be thankful in the end times. Paul says, in everything, give thanks. Live as if you are a thankful person. Every aspect of your life, every minute of your life. To put it another way, as Allie wrote in her blog this week, those of you who don't know this, there's such thing as a blog, B-L-O-G. It's in this social media kind of way. Allie wrote this, I wake up every morning in a state of steadfastness. Now, Allie's using some older words. Let's dissect that. Let's see how you and I can live in that way. Steadfastness, thankfulness, being faithful to the call which is on our lives, being in a constant state of thankfulness. Someone has reported that the way they do this, and this works for them, it probably wouldn't work for all of us, but it might work for you. If you have difficulty staying in a state of thankfulness, one individual reports, I use sticky notes, he said. I shave every morning in front of a mirror, he said. So I take a sticky note. Sometimes it's a bright one, sometimes it's a pastel one. It's whatever my family has in the house. And I put words of thankfulness, thanksgiving, words of gratitude on that sticky note. And I put it right there on the mirror. Now, sometimes, he says, it falls off because it gets so steamy in there because I took a long shower. So I have to stick it back up. If it's not a sticky note, use some tape. And if it's not tape or a sticky note, do what you have to do. Paul says, do what you have to do to remain in a state of thankfulness. Thankful constantly for what God has done for you. Some of us are going to find ways this next week, starting today, in how we can be thankful people. Paul doesn't end there, though. He ends in a different way. He ends with something unique to Paul. For Paul then will say, establish yourself